The cold desert wind howled against the Goldstone facility, but inside Dr. Elena Vance heard only the digital pulse of the universe. The blue glow of the monitors reflected in her eyes, a sharp contrast to the absolute darkness of the Mojave night. For years, Elena had been a sidelined astrophysicist. She was haunted by the ghost of her father, a man who vanished into the black hole of classified research during the 1990s under Project Atlas. Everyone told her he had simply cracked, but Elena knew better. She spent her nights scouring the solar system, looking for the truth she knew he had found. Then at 3 a.m, the truth found her. An object designated 3I/Atlas blipped onto her monitors. It wasn't drifting like a comet. It was decelerating with a precision that defied every known law of physics. It wasn't a cold rock. It was a craft demonstrating intelligent propulsion. The desert air outside was a tomb, silent and heavy with secrets. The adrenaline surge was short-lived. Within hours, Elena's screens flickered and died. A security protocol message replaced her complex star charts. Her access to the deep space network was revoked, and she watched in horror as her local servers began a forced remote wipe. The Pentagon was scrubbing her discovery before she could even hit save. Desperately, she pulled a weathered, encrypted file from a hidden partition on her personal laptop, data she had salvaged from her father's final research notes decades ago. As the progress bar on the wipe reached 90%, she saw it. The frequency signature of 3I/Atlas was an exact match to a signal her father had recorded 30 years ago. He hadn't just discovered this object, he had been waiting for its return. The drive hummed, the only sound in the suffocating silence of the terminal. The heavy thud of military boots echoed through the hallway. General Marcus Thorne of the Pentagon stepped into the room, his presence sucking the air out of the office. He didn't offer a greeting. Instead, he spoke with the cold authority of a man used to burying secrets. He warned her that she was now under the jurisdiction of the Espionage Act. Any mention of the anomaly would be treason. Thorne's eyes were like flint, showing no room for negotiation. But as he spoke, Elena noticed a detail in the redacted documents he held, a timestamp that predated her detection by several days. Thorne's uniform was a wall of medals, a testament to a life lived in the service of shadows. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The Pentagon wasn't just hiding an alien object. They had been in communication with it for decades. They weren't surprised by the arrival of 3I/Atlas. They were expecting it. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Elena felt a cold sweat break as she realized the depth of the betrayal. Her father hadn't died in an accident. He had been a casualty of a 30-year silence, a man who knew too much about a deal he couldn't stop. While Thorne's team began dismantling her hardware, Elena moved with a calm she didn't know she possessed. Under the shadow of her desk, she initiated a clandestine clone of the primary data drive. The status bar crawled with agonizing slowness as Thorne continued his threats, oblivious to the digital heist happening inches from his feet. Every second felt like an eternity as the military technicians moved closer. The moment the transfer finished, she palmed the small drive and slipped it into her boot. With the facility being locked down, Elena knew she had only seconds. She claimed she needed to collect her belongings, then slipped out through a maintenance hatch she had mapped out months ago. Stepping into the Mojave night, clutching the evidence of the world's greatest secret, she knew her life was over. She was now a fugitive, carrying a truth that would change human history forever. The sand crunched beneath her boots, a loud sound in the stillness of her new life. The desert stars seemed like accusing eyes as she drove toward the outskirts of Las Vegas. The cloned drive burned in her pocket. She couldn't go to the police or the press. Thorne's reach was absolute. She needed a ghost, someone the system forgot. That person was Sarah. Years ago, they were the brightest minds at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, but while Elena had tried to change the system from within, Sarah had retreated into the world of hacking and signal decryption. Elena found her in a basement apartment. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee. Sarah didn't ask questions when she saw Elena's trembling hands. She simply took the drive and plugged it into a custom terminal that looked like a jagged mountain of circuit boards. As the data began to stream across the monitors, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy. This wasn't just cosmic noise, it was a structured broadcast. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, stripping away layers of Pentagon-grade encryption that had been layered over the original signal like a digital shroud. "It's a census, Elena," Sarah whispered, her face turning pale in the monitor's blue glow. The data revealed biological profiles of millions of humans, genetic markers, neural patterns, and reproductive data. 3I/Atlas wasn't just observing, it was cataloging. Further decryption revealed the 3I protocol, a cache of documents dated back to 1994. The Pentagon had made a secret deal. They had traded this massive trove of human biological data for the blueprints of advanced propulsion technology. They had sold out the human race's genetic blueprint to a power they couldn't comprehend, all to win a technological arms race. Elena felt a sickening realization dawning. Her father's final research notes weren't the delusional ramblings of a broken man, they were a desperate warning. He hadn't died in a freak lab accident. He had been sanitized because he discovered that 3I/Atlas was never meant to be a messenger of peace. It was a harvester, an entity sent to collect the interest on a 30-year-old loan. The Pentagon wasn't protecting Earth from an invasion. They were protecting their partnership with an interstellar predator that was coming to collect its due. Black SUVs swerved into the alleyway below. General Thorne's recovery teams, men who didn't exist on any official payroll, had found them. The roar of engines echoed against the brick walls. "Go! The back stairs now!" Sarah yelled, grabbing a portable decryption deck and shoving Elena toward the rusted fire escape. The chase that followed was a blur of screeching tires and escapes through the neon-drenched, chaotic labyrinth of the city. Elena drove with a desperation born of absolute terror, weaving through the midnight traffic as black-clad operatives ignored every traffic law to reclaim the drive. They eventually found refuge in a derelict warehouse. While the world outside remained unaware, the clock ticked toward zero. Sarah managed to tap into a hidden military uplink, revealing a terrifying development. 3I/Atlas was decelerating rapidly and would enter Earth's orbit in less than 48 hours. The Pentagon wasn't preparing a welcome. They were activating Project Aegis, a kinetic bombardment system to vaporize the craft before it could touch the atmosphere. It was a scorched earth policy. Thorne would rather trigger a global catastrophe and destroy the asteroid than let the public see the evidence of the Pentagon's 30-year complicity. Elena stared at the final lines of code Sarah had unearthed. There was one more layer. It was a rhythmic, pulsing invitation sent in a language of pure mathematics. The craft wasn't just arriving on a schedule, it had been summoned. The source of the beacon was localized, fixed, and terrifyingly close. The signal that had pulled 3I/Atlas across the Buddha's void wasn't coming from space. It was being broadcast from a secure terminal located within the sub-basements of the Pentagon itself. Elena felt the weight of the realization crush her breath. They hadn't just made a bad deal, they had invited the harvester to the door. The Maryland night was heavy with the scent of ozone and impending rain as Elena and Sarah skirted the high-security perimeter of the Goddard Space Flight Center. This was no longer a flight from the law, it was a desperate race against a clock ticking down to humanity's forced evolution or its final silence. Sarah's hands moved with frantic precision, her portable decryption deck chirping softly as it tricked the facility's external sensors into seeing ghosts. They moved like shadows through the service tunnels, the hum of massive cooling fans masking the sound of their breath. Every step felt like a betrayal of the life Elena once knew. Yet it was the only path toward the truth her father had died to protect. They were deep inside the belly of the beast now, where the strings of global communication were pulled by unseen hands. They reached the primary uplink hub, a cavernous room filled with the rhythmic pulsing of servers that held the keys to the world's communication networks. But they weren't alone. General Marcus Thorne stood at the center of the hub, flanked by two silent operatives who looked more like statues than men. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply watched Elena with a look of profound, weary disappointment. He told her that she was playing with forces she couldn't possibly understand. He claimed the 3I protocol was a necessary evil, a desperate bargain struck in the 1990s to ensure that humanity wasn't simply erased from the cosmic record. To Thorne, the trade of biological data was a small price for the propulsion secrets that had kept the nation's defense decades ahead of its rivals. He argued that the truth would cause a global collapse, a panic that would destroy civilization faster than any harvester could. He spoke of order, of the burden of the few to protect the many from a reality they were not yet ready to face. Elena looked at the man who had ordered her father's death and felt a strange surge of clarity. She told him that a civilization built on a foundation of lies and traded souls wasn't worth saving if it couldn't face its own reflection in the mirror of the stars. While Thorne spoke, Elena's fingers found the interface of the primary terminal, her movements hidden by the shadows of the server racks. She bypassed the Pentagon's final firewall using the cloned drive, reaching the last unbreakable encryption layer her father had left behind 3 decades ago. The prompt for the master override flashed red on the screen, demanding a key that had eluded the world's best cryptographers. Elena remembered the old research notes, the way her father would tuck her in and call her his little Nova. With trembling fingers, she typed the nickname into the prompt. The red light turned to a brilliant, steady green. Her father had never given up on her. He had left the ultimate weapon in the hands of the only person he knew would have the courage to use it. "It's over, Marcus," she whispered, her voice echoing in the sterile room. As the sirens began to wail and the military's kinetic interceptors prepared to launch from their orbital platforms, Elena hit the command to execute. In an instant, the veil was lifted. The raw data, the secret logs of the 3I protocol, and the terrifyingly clear images of the 3I/Atlas craft were broadcast to every satellite, or every television, and every smartphone on the planet. The digital flood was unstoppable, a tidal wave of truth crashing over the world's collective consciousness. Outside, the sky ignited with an unnatural radiance. The asteroid shed its rocky exterior, revealing a shimmering, translucent structure of impossible geometry that pulsed with a soft bioluminescent light. It didn't attack. It simply hovered, a silent witness to the history it had come to collect. The kinetic interceptors, launched too late, were redirected or deactivated as the global chain of command shattered under the weight of public transparency. Thorne stood frozen as his authority evaporated, his secrets now common knowledge for 7 billion people. The world watched in a stunned silence that transcended borders and languages. Elena walked out of the facility into the cool morning air, watching the glowing presence of 3I/Atlas in the dawn sky. She wasn't a hero yet, and the world was in chaos. But for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her father's legacy rest lightly on her shoulders. The age of secrets had ended, replaced by a terrifying, beautiful age of accountability. Humanity was no longer alone, and the shadows could no longer hide the cost of progress. But as she looked up, a new faint signal began to chirp on her handheld monitor, a rhythmic pulse coming not from the Boda's void, but from the dark side of the moon. The harvester was here, but it was clear that the rest of the fleet was already waiting in the darkness.